Imagine this: a billionaire with questionable social power and a fetish for Mars invites one child from every continent on Earth to be a part of an expedition to another planet. The expedition will run for an unknown length of time, and there's uncertainty about pretty much everything. For example, it's unknown how the experience will affect the children's bodies, mental health, and social relationships. The simple question I have for you is, would you let your child, or any child for that matter, go on this expedition? By the way, your answer should be no. Welcome to Tucciversity. In today's class, we're looking at the book The Anxious Generation by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. We'll be covering the topics outlined on your screen as they are described in the text. Let's dive in. Gen Z are defined in the book as those born after 1995. Now, some make a distinction between Gen Z and a new Gen Alpha, which are those born after 2010. They're the ones you see sitting in the restaurants, absorbed in their iPads, while their parents are necking one too many bottles of red. The anxious generation refers to both of these groups of people. So going forward, we'll discuss Gen Z and Gen Alpha collectively. Now, the journey to another planet conundrum that I illustrated at the start of this video is a thought experiment put forward by Haidt at the beginning of the book. Haidt believes that the concept of sending kids on a journey with unknown consequences is exactly what we did with Gen Z when we gave them unprecedented access to smartphones, social media, and the online world. The main contention of the book is that overprotection in the real world and underprotection in the virtual world have led to Gen Z becoming the anxious generation. All the stats show us that mental health for kids, adolescents, and young adults is getting worse. We're seeing rises in depression, anxiety, suicidality, and loneliness at rates that we haven't seen since we started reporting on this stuff. So when did this all start? Well, Haidt's book suggests that this crisis began between 2010 and 2015, a period that he coined the Great Rewiring, which we'll go into in a little more depth later on. But before we go any further, you might be thinking, whoa, hold your horses. People have always been depressed and anxious. Previous generations lived through wars, famines, diseases. They worked 18-hour days and got paid peanuts. How can kids these days with their triple cheeseburgers and their four-night dances be anxious or depressed? Surely these kids are just saying that they're anxious and depressed because that's what's popular now. Unfortunately, there's a few reasons why this doesn't seem to be the case. Firstly, the data shows that while many people are self-reporting increased feelings of depression, anxiety, and the like, we're also seeing an increase in behavioral metrics. For example, we're seeing more instances of self-harm, emergency room visits, suicide attempts, and suicides. If people were just saying that they feel anxious and depressed, we wouldn't be seeing these outcomes. We're also seeing girls suffer a lot more than boys, although in a slightly different way. If we've always been depressed and anxious and nothing's really changed, why are we seeing such a sudden difference between boys and girls when in many ways life has improved for women around the world? In almost every metric, life is better now than it's ever been. We should be getting happier, but we're not. Instead, we're feeling lonely, isolated, and worthless. So what caused this? Let's talk about the Great Rewiring. As previously mentioned, the Great Rewiring is a period between 2010 and 2015 where childhood drastically changed. It was a shift from riding bikes with your friends and asking a girl to the school dance to jumping on a team deathmatch in COD and asking the girls at your school for nudes. It's during this period that we see girls spiraling into the vortex of social media while boys began their retreat from the real world to the safety and comfort of video games and online pornography. But what created this Great Rewiring? I mean, before 2010, we still had sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We had Playboy bunnies and RuneScape and GTA San Andreas. We even had the bleach blonde Eminem. Why did things only start going bad around the 2010s? According to Haidt, there are 4 things that happened during this period that changed everything. Firstly, kids got access to high-speed, high-bandwidth internet. This meant that when on a computer, kids had access to anything and everything that the internet had to offer at a far quicker speed. speed. Secondly, kids got smartphones. This meant that all the stimulation that a young developing brain could want could be accessed pretty much any time. It could also now be done privately, which was something that was difficult to do back when you only had one computer to share in the household. Thirdly, we got front-facing cameras. This encouraged the trend of displaying your face and eventually your body for others to see and comment on. And lastly, we got likes and retweets, which was the cherry on top. A metric that we could use to easily quantify how successful a post was and to help reinforce behavior. Now, these innovations affected girls and boys differently, and they were used in different ways. Despite the differences in how girls and boys engaged in the online world, one thing is irrefutable. Social media affects girls far worse than boys. The reasons suggested by Haidt are as such. Girls are more visual. They use social media with a lot of imagery. Instagram, TikTok, Tumblr, Pinterest. These are girls' apps of choice. By being on these sites, girls are constantly inundated with social comparison, so much so that it's near impossible to avoid. The second reason is girls also tend to show aggression via gossip and reputational damage. Where boys will probably just punch on, girls are far more likely to share secrets, spread rumors, or even try to embarrass and shame other girls. The impact of these activities increases tenfold when you consider the power of social media. A third reason is that girls are far more open and likely to speak about their feelings online. Girls, on average, are far more likely to develop sociogenic illnesses, which is just another way of saying that girls are far more likely to suffer when other girls suffer. When girls express negative feelings online, a lot of other girls absorb this and tend to take on that baggage. The last reason is girls are far more likely to be the victims of harassment or predatory behavior online. Unfortunately, the online world is riddled with sickos, pests, and creeps, and these people tend to target young girls. Now, this is obviously terrible, but if you think boys' lives are all sunshine and rainbows, you'd be mistaken. Since the 1970s, boys have slowly been retreating from the real world to find safety and comfort in the virtual world. Haidt suggests many reasons for this, and I won't go into all of them, but they do all share a common idea, and that is men are lost and don't know what to do. So lost, in fact, that a new acronym, NEET, had to be created, and this stands for Not in Education, Employment, or Training, and you guessed it, men are the majority of this group. What this looks like in the real world is a lot of men stuck inside their bedrooms, not getting girlfriends, not leaving the house, not having any future prospects, and probably playing lots of video games and watching lots of porn. Boys feel like they can't win in the real world, but they feel like they can in the virtual one. Safe to say, the Great Rewiring has f***ed us up. Let us now dive a little deeper into how the Great Rewiring changed an entire generation's childhood. A big part of Haidt's book is describing the shift from a traditional play-based childhood to what we have now, a phone-based one. A very important concept that he introduces to us is free play. Something that he explains is super important for kids. Free play is play for the sake of it. There's not necessarily rules or an intended outcome. It's just play. Climbing the monkey bars, running around with sticks, doing that slappy hand thing that girls do are all examples of free play. Now, free play has many developmental benefits, and kids who are deprived of free play are likely to suffer physical, mental, social, and emotional consequences down the track. Anything that stops kids from doing things that are important for their development are considered experience blockers, and you guessed it, phones are Exhibit A. Smartphones contribute to what Haidt calls the 4 foundational harms. These are sleep deprivation, social deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction. But confusingly, smartphones aren't the only experience blockers that are fueling a phone-based childhood. In other words, it's not just smartphones that are reducing the time kids spend having free play. Here are some other reasons from Haidt as to why we're seeing a decline. Firstly, these days, kids have too many structured and supervised activities. You see, society tends to measure success by how much money you have. To get a lot of money, you need to have a good job. And to get that, you have to either do well at school or become an artist or an athlete. So thinking like that, What do teachers and parents tend to do? Well, they fill up all their kids' spare time with extracurricular activities or homework in the hopes that this will turn little Jimmy into Einstein or Michael Jordan. The problem here is that all of these activities, whether it be piano lessons, football training, or calculus for 6-year-olds, are all extremely structured and supervised by adults. This is the exact opposite of free play. Now, kids are also spending less time out in their neighborhood, doing things that kids used to do, like climbing trees, riding bikes, or kicking balls. A growing fear of stranger danger has embedded itself into all of our minds, and because of this, we see sex pests and child snatchers everywhere we look. Extremely tragic stories that we see on the news and online are so emotionally powerful that they have changed society's standards for when, where, and what kids should be doing. And this is despite these tragedies being outliers. Now, there are other reasons that Haidt mentions, such as how urban planning makes it difficult for kids to catch up with each other and how playgrounds are becoming overly safe. The point is, all of these things result in less autonomy, independence, and responsibility for kids, all of which are essential ingredients to becoming a healthy adult. Free play provides a low-risk environment where kids can test their limits on their own terms and practice important skills like collaboration, cooperation, and compromise. Overprotective teachers and helicopter parenting, as well as the other things I've mentioned, have all created a motto of safety at all costs. And this spits in the face of a very obvious fact that Haidt states: kids are anti-fragile. Any pressure, responsibility, independence, or challenge that you give to a kid, so long as it's age appropriate and within reason, makes them more competent and skilled in the art of being a human. So with that in mind, how do we reverse the damage, or at least stop future generations from following our treacherous path? There are 4 parties that Haidt suggests have to make some changes to help get us out of this mess. They are governments, tech companies, schools, and parents. Firstly, governments need to start better enforcing age restriction laws. They also need to better clarify neglect laws, which can have some parents fearing that they're going to lose their kids if they so much as let their child walk down to the bakery. Tech companies need to create age limits for full access to their sites and be better at policing this. They should also be encouraged to create new versions of apps that are more protective of minors. On top of this, they can also innovate and create new software that can better link parents to their child's online activities. Schools need to ban phones during school time. They should take phones off kids at the beginning of the school day and return them at the end. Otherwise, phones should be locked away in a locker and not seen until the school bell rings. Lastly, parents can begin giving their child more responsibility by appropriately exposing them to the real world. This can be done by slowly letting them walk to school, to the shops, or to a friend's house alone. As a whole, Haidt has suggested 4 foundational reforms. No smartphones before high school, no social media until 16, phone-free schools, and more unsupervised free play. The last thing to say is that at the end of the book, Haidt makes a point of stating that everyone's lives and children are different. Some of the suggestions in this book are not a one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, they can be considered guidelines that people can experiment with and tailor to their own situation. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of class. As always, I highly recommend that you read the book yourself and also read other books that may oppose the viewpoints that we've discussed. That way you can synthesize all the other views and get a clearer understanding of the topic. For homework, I want you to think about your childhood, either past or present, and see how it fits in with what we've learned today. Once you've done this, if you're comfortable, share it in the comments. That's it for today. I'll see you next class.
All I hear, go get the money, so I go get it. Hate means I do something right, so I'ma let 'em. Yeah, I'ma let 'em, yeah.